And I was in a creative writing class in high school, and I told my teacher, I said, Mr. Hertzfeld, I love writing, but I know this isn't going to be my career. I really want to go to medical school someday. And he said, who says you have to choose? And the next day he brought in all these books, right? What an amazing teacher. He brought in all these books that were written by authors who happened to be doctors. And I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Welcome to the Origins of Creativity podcast, brought to you by Bookling Media, where we discover the magic behind creativity through the stories of passionate creators. Listen in and fill your creative vessel with delightful insights and uplifting tales. Hello, you are listening to the Origins of Creativity podcast. I am your host, Becky Gehrisch. Thank you all for tuning in today. Today, we'll be talking about what it is like to be a multi-genre author and how reading paved the way to a writing career. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app. This way, you won't miss the next episode and it helps others find us. My guest today is Rajani LaRocca. She was born in India, raised in Kentucky, and now lives in the Boston area, where she practices medicine and writes award-winning books for young readers, including the Newbery-Honor Winning middle grade novel in verse, Red, White, and Whole. You may not know this, but she loves to cook, travel, and keep houseplants alive. And for the first time ever, she's succeeding. She has amazed me with how prolific she has been as an author in the past 5 years, I think it is. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, Rajani LaRocca.
Thank you for having me, Becky. I'm excited to be here.
Great. And am I right to say the last 5 years? I was trying to calculate. It might be a little bit longer, but once things came out?
My first book came out in 2019.
Awesome. So when we first met, like I said, you had just a couple books out. It was right before things closed down for COVID. And now you have 20 books out. So that is so prolific. And it has been exciting to see a new book come out, and just seeing how well received this has been and exciting.
Thank you. It's been surprising to me too.
Which is really, really fascinating because you have a medical background. You are a practicing doctor, correct?
Yes, I'm an internal medicine doctor, a primary care doctor.
Primary care, right. And, reading all about you, and we're going to kind of talk about this, your upbringing, your background, what you studied, and what things you've gone through in your life, and how that has opened this literacy career, and how that has been for you, and what has inspired you, and if this is that creative outlet for you. But first, you have the 20 books, but there are more coming, so there's one coming in May and there's one coming in August. Could you tell us just a little bit about both of those?
Yeah. So in May, I have Some of Us, A Story of Citizenship in the United States, coming out on May 27th, to be precise. It is a nonfiction picture book about immigration and naturalization, and kind of celebrating all the people who choose to come to this country and choose to become American. And it's really close to my heart as somebody who is an immigrant. I came to the U.S. as a baby, and I remember being naturalized. I was 15 years old. And actually, everyone who worked on this book is an immigrant and a naturalized citizen. Hui Van Lee is the illustrator. Yeah, the editor and the art director are all immigrants and naturalized citizens.
Oh, that is amazing. I love that. And so well timed for everyone who's, needing to know more about what this is and what it takes. And did you say so it's a nonfiction book? What genre? Is that picture book, did you say? Or is that?
It is a picture book. Yes, a nonfiction picture book. And the illustrations are just absolutely amazing. I'm so gorgeous.
Oh, okay. Great. Oh my gosh. And then the next one will be out on August 5th, right?
That's right. That is called Fall is for Beginnings. And it is the follow-up to Summer is for Cousins, featuring the same main character, Ravi, who is a little boy. And it is the beginning of the school year. He's all excited to go back to school and see his best friend, Joe. But then a new girl named Ellie shows up in class and says, I just know we're going to be best friends. And he doesn't really know quite what to do with that.
Oh, wow.
So it's all about the beginning of the school year. Yeah. And beginning friendships.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So that got me thinking right away. So how did you come up with that idea? You know, I is that something that you've pulled from your own life, or is that something's happened to you, or just what that character would have, you know, had an experience with to have the other person say, we're going to be best friends? You know, like, I don't think I've ever experienced that situation.
I honestly don't know where it came from, except from the character itself. Like, I think Ravi is just a really sweet little guy who is kind of unassuming and maybe a little bit anxious. And so he really takes relationships, especially close relationships, he takes them very seriously. And so Ellie, who is the new girl who comes to town, is a lot. Like, she's just got a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm. And all that she does is done with like very, very good intentions. And she's like, I know we're going to be best friends. So it's just so adorable. And so that's where it came from, is the character and what he might have to contend with. So it was really fun to write. And it's the same illustrator who's doing this book as Summers for Cousins. It's Abhi Alwar, and she's amazing.
Oh, good. Yeah. I love how, to keep that all the same. And you never know if that's something like you experience personally, or, as a writer, you're in the heads of so many characters, and you get to know how they would respond and come up with scenarios of what they might experience and how they would react. So that's a perfect example of that idea. So in your bio, I didn't read it all because I wanted to kind of get into it piece by piece a little bit here. You read so much as a child, and I'd love for you to give us a little bit of an idea of how that was growing up and how that kind of segued into writing. And when did you discover that you wanted this to be a career in that way?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I've always been a huge reader. When I was a kid, I was just one of those kids that always had a book in my hands. Like, I just couldn't get enough, and I kind of read everything. And if I didn't have something to read, I would kind of look around for other random things to read. So I read plenty of novels. My all-time favorite book in the world was The Westing Game. I read nonfiction. I read comic books. I read Indian comic books called Amar Chitra Kathas, which kind of told stories from Indian history and literature and mythology. And honestly, like, I read like cereal boxes. I read like advertisements. I like read everything I could get my hands on if I didn't have a book, but I usually had a book. And it was a really wonderful time. I mean, my parents were really happy for me to read whatever I wanted to. And especially when I was in India, when my cousins were in school was the time that I was visiting India. Like, during our summer break, they had school. So during the day, I'd have to figure out what to do. And I would often kind of go down to the local library with my uncle or aunt, and I would pick out a bunch of books, and literally no one cared what I picked out. And like, a lot of the books were definitely grown-up books. I read a bunch of Agatha Christie mysteries as a kid, and I was like, I didn't understand half of what was happening, but it was fine. And it was fun. And like, it's really interesting that like, I find that like a lot of times, nowadays we're wondering about what kids are reading and whether it's okay for them. For the most part, I think kids filter out stuff that they don't understand. And if it's too adult, they're not interested and they just put things away. So, I mean, as a kid who kind of had unfettered access to whatever books I wanted, I chose what I wanted to read. And I certainly, grew in vocabulary and learned about different points of view. And it was great. And luckily, my parents never told me that comic books, because we didn't have graphic novels at the time, but they never told me that comic books were not real reading. I was able to read whatever I wanted. And I learned a lot from comic books, I have to tell you. So, I mean,
Right.
I read a lot of stuff. And I think because of that, I grew up loving stories. And I think that's kind of what propelled me to become a writer eventually. I really did a lot of writing when I was in school, but I knew pretty early on that I wanted to be a doctor, mainly because I read a book called Ouch, All About Cuts and Other Hurts. And I was so fascinated by it. And I think I read it when I was like 6 or 7. that I was like, I think I want to study this like forever. And so that was the
Wow.
thing that made me want to go into medicine. Yeah. So it was a big deal to me.
Right. That one book. Wow.
Yeah. And because of that, I was kind of like in my mind, like, okay, these are the things I have to do. These are the things I have to be good at to be a doctor. But I still loved writing. And I was in a creative writing class in high school. And I told my teacher, I said, Mr. Hertzfeld, I love writing, but I know this isn't going to be my career. I really want to go to medical school someday. And he said, who says you have to choose?
Wow.
And the next day he brought in all these books, right? What an amazing teacher. He brought in all these books that were written by authors who happened to be doctors. And I
No
was like,
way.
oh, yeah. Oh,
Wow,
yeah.
that's amazing to have that right then and there, right when you were deciding. Because that got me thinking, of there were paths I didn't know I had options to, or multiple paths that if I had known, like you had, that's a great, amazing teacher to be able to say, oh yeah, here you can. Wow, I love that.
Right? I was, so I did a decent amount of like essay writing, I would say, when I was in college, like personal essay, not like English essay. I did that too, but that was for class. I took a class called the Literature of Social Reflection, and it was really all personal essay writing. It was really fun. But I never imagined that I would write, like seriously write, until much later. But I was still a big reader. I was a big, big reader, like, even during medical school, even during residency, even, during young motherhood, I always had a book.
And when you started working on the books that are now published, was it, okay, this is what I'm doing, or I'm going to try it? Or was it, all of that? Or I've had this story laying around and I really want to do this now that XYZ, I'm curious.
Yeah, what happened was that I was in my early 40s. My children were older, they were in school, and I'd been practicing medicine for a while and felt like, okay, my life is under a little bit more under control now than it used to be. And I thought maybe I can go back to something else I love to do that I haven't done in a long time. Maybe I could go back to writing. And so initially it just started with I decided to take some classes. And at first I took some online through writers.com. But then I found writing classes in person in Boston at a place called Grub Street. And it was wonderful. So I took some classes. I tried to figure out like what kind of writing I was interested in doing. And I think it became apparent pretty early on that I wanted to write for kids, mainly because I think the books that made the biggest difference in my life were the ones that I read when I was a kid.
Right. Exactly.
I thought maybe that's what I want to do. And then it's through these classes, the in-person classes in particular, I met other writers who were kind of in the same place that I was, like just starting out, just kind of like not wondering, like not knowing what we wanted to write yet, but just kind of like looking around and trying to figure that out. And I made some really good friends and we formed critique groups. And once you have friends who are saying what happens next, then you do keep going.
Oh, exactly. You're right. Yeah.
Right? I have to say, like early on, I was worried that I would run out of ideas. But then once I started writing, I was like, oh, I'm going to have too many ideas and I better figure out what thing to write next. It's fascinating how that works.
Right. It just kind of opens up that creative flow and it just might keep coming and coming and coming. But do you ever have any moments where you have writer's block where you have the ideas, but maybe some things get stuck somehow? I'm curious about that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I
Okay.
think we all do, but I think the question is kind of what do you do when this happens? Because it happens to all of us. Because, I mean, honestly, Becky, I think that all of writing is tricking your brain into actually doing the thing that you want it to do. I mean, that's probably true
Yes.
of everything we do in our lives.
Right.
So much of writing is like figuring out how to make your brain do this thing that it is kind of actively resisting until you're in like this amazing flow state. And then you're like, I could do this forever, right?
It's like a big puzzle. I mean, I feel like all creativity is like a puzzle. You're piecing something together to create something new, and you don't have the instructions necessarily to do that. Each story is unique and different.
Right. So when I have writer's block or when I'm stuck in a story or when I'm just like unmotivated by the story, which definitely happens, There are a few things that I do. Like, so sometimes it is truly time for a break and you just need to get up and like go outside and like be in the sun a little bit and just like feel like a human. That's definitely one thing you can do. Um, Another thing I can do is I usually have multiple projects going on. So, I call it productive procrastination, where it's like, I don't want to work on this thing because it's making my brain hurt. So I'm going to work on this other thing that I thought was harder, but actually it feels easier right now. And so you work on that thing. And so you do make progress in something, but on the other hand, your subconscious is working on that thing that got you stuck. And
Yes.
9 times out of 10, after you've done that thing for a while, you can go back to the original project and be like, oh, okay, I know what to do now.
Oh, right.
Um,
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Yes. Another thing that I do is I just set a timer for 6 minutes.
Hmm.
And my only rule is that I must keep typing for 6 minutes. And it does not matter how bad I think it is. I have to
Does it
keep
usually
going.
go longer though? I mean,
It almost always goes longer.
okay, I was gonna say like I can imagine that would be it's just getting started. And then it seems like, okay, I don't have to go longer if I don't have to, but then an hour later maybe it's you're in the flow. I
Yeah.
that's great.
Yes. And you realize that the thing that you thought was so terrible, like, because that's the problem, is that the inner editor is like, this is awful, this is bad. Who
Mm.
said you know how to write? But if you get rid of that inner editor, you just say, this is the rule that I'm operating on right now, is that I don't get to judge this. You go back
Mhm.
and you're like, you know what? It's not that bad. Or like, there's some good stuff in here, and all I need to do is tighten it up, or whatever. Or I didn't know I was going to write that. That's always a fun thing.
Oh, right. That's a great segue because I was thinking of all the different, children's book genre subcategories. You have your picture books, you have middle grade, you have YA, you have all of these different ways of writing and poetry and prose and nonfiction as well. So, do you ever start writing nonfiction and it turns into something else that, I think it's going to go this direction instead?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I'm not sure that I've ever written something that I thought was nonfiction and ended up being fiction.
I could see me doing that. It would be like, oops, well.
Well, I mean, okay, in many ways, if it turns into fiction, then it's a big sigh of relief because you can then make up stuff, right?
Right. That's true.
But I will tell you that one of my nonfiction books, Your One and Only Heart, I worked on it for like 5 years. It was one of the earliest, picture books that I had ever drafted. And it just was not working. I was like, why is this thing, like, I don't know. It's just feeling really boring, and it's feeling really like I'm just spitting out a bunch of facts and it doesn't seem to be gelling. And I put it away to like rest. And literally 5 years later, I woke up one day and looked at it and I was like, I know how to write this. I know how to write this. I'm going to write this in poems. And they're going to be paired
Oh.
poems about like contrasting characteristics of the heart. And isn't that cool? Like, it's singular and it is cooperative. It is electric and muscular. It is
Oh,
constant
wow.
and variable. Like, it's so cool. And I was like, that's it. That's the way to do it. And so it ended up being 7 paired poems, and kind of a beginning poem and an ending poem. And it was just so fun. So sometimes, the journey can be long, even on something like a picture book, or maybe especially like something like a picture book where it's like you need to get the viewpoint perfect before it can be the thing that it's supposed to be.
Mm. Right. And I think a lot of writers might feel that they haven't reached this point where, it's been a year and I can't figure out the story and I just need to let it go. But that just proves that it may take many years for something to click as you're working on other things to have some solution come up, and it's not an overnight dream. Some people think, I'll just sleep on it, or it might take a while. And I think that's important for people to really understand that it's artistic, it flows, it comes and goes as much as like a chapter in your life. So that's very important. I think
Yes.
they didn't, some people don't understand, and it's good to hear from you that is something that can happen.
Yes. And sometimes you need that time. Sometimes you need more time or experience as a human being, or as a writer, to come back and say, oh, now I know how to do this.
Okay, that just got me thinking about the old movie Big with Tom Hanks, and he's a little boy, and he's playing a video game, and he doesn't know how to kill the ice monster or something, and he's stuck. Well, then he goes through his whole like, I'm grown up and big, and then he comes back at the very close to the very end. He's matured suddenly, and he knows how to kill this monster. And I think sometimes in our own lives, not in a make believe life, it takes maturity, it takes maturing, it takes more like life experiences to build to those points where you can maybe even solve some of those questions that you yourself are playing with creatively that you don't have a solution to. And I think that's an interesting kind of thought in my head about that movie Big, where it took him a little bit of time to mature to get to this answer that was so hard for him just a few months technically ago. So did
Right.
you ever see that movie?
Oh yeah. No, I
Yeah.
love that movie.
That was a
There's
good
some
one.
things about it that don't age well, but it is
No.
a really adorable movie.
Right. The 80s. Oh, we gotta love it. And which is historical fiction now, and people write about the 80s. So now, yeah, you've got that in there. Oh, wow.
Exactly.
So you read everything, like you said, and now you're writing and you're traveling and you're working on house plans. Do you have like little nuggets that kind of get hidden in your books about the other passions and creative outlets in your life?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, I have three nonfiction science books about medical topics, right? So
Right.
clearly medicine, you know, gets
Yes.
into my writing. And Red, White, and Whole has an entire medical aspect to it. Yeah. Much Ado About Baseball was my sequel, the companion novel to Midsummer's Mayhem, and it involves um, math puzzles and a math team, and I was totally on the math team in my school and loved math puzzles. Midsummer's Mayhem, my first novel, involves baking, and I love to bake, although I came to baking later on in my life, and my whole family loves to bake, so we had fun with that. Yeah, every single book that I write has something from me in it. Summer is for Cousins. My agent, it was so funny, my agent, who's a wonderful friend,
Oh,
said,
he's
could you just
amazing.
write a picture book? He said, could you just write a picture book about summer? Because he just loves the summer. He said, anything about it. Like, what do you think? I was like, of course. So I thought about it and I was like, you know what? Like, for me, my favorite childhood memories were about being with my cousins during the summer. And I'm an only child, and that was just a really precious time for me. When we went to India and saw everybody. And one of the really cool things is that a couple of my cousins actually for a while, like one lives like in the next town over, and his brother used to live nearby. So during the summers, our kids would get together. So those sets of cousins would get together. So it was like so great. But I remember going to India because we would only go every like 3 to 5 years because it was a long way and it was expensive.
Oh, right.
And I just
Yeah.
remembered thinking, like, I know my cousins love me, but like, what if they've forgotten like all the
Mm,
stuff we used to do? Like, what if they don't remember me as well anymore? And I took that feeling and put it
mm,
into Summers for Cousins, that's how Ruby feels at the beginning of the book. It's like he's got his favorite big cousin, who is the oldest cousin, who is the only other boy, Dhruv. And at the beginning of the book, Ruby is like, I'm so excited to see him, but he also feels a little shy. And he's like, what if he doesn't remember all the favorite things we used to do together? And that's where it started.
right. The vulnerable side of that is necessary. And I was reading, what you have said on your website, notes from the author, things that made you feel different growing up. And for other creatives who feel different, or there's something that they don't feel like they fit in, um, those are the gems and jewels that make the unique product of your books. And I think people can embrace that in themselves, that whatever thing that they might think is different, or they might even have some, extra quirky characteristic, that is what people love to read, because then they connect with what they have that's different, or their experiences. And I grew up in the same kind of town that I am in now. And I don't have a lot of experiences traveling as a young person. I had a sister, and a lot of our friends had similar lives. So finding those little things about myself that are completely special might not be as special for the people I'm near. So I think if people can kind of harness that about themselves and really um, love and appreciate that, and bring that out in their writing or their art, they might really find that others connect with it.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think that it's those little moments that are universal, right?
Right.
I think all of growing up is about the tension between wanting to be like everyone else and needing to be yourself.
Right.
And that is what we try to capture when we write for kids.
Yes. And it doesn't always have to be, a blatant lesson out there, and you capture that so well where it's just part of their lives, and people can understand and read through that to connect to their own lives and have it a lesson in their own world to better them. And your intention may not have, of course, been that. But it does come through as, I can relate to this. Like you said, you related to a book that they may not have intended. It was just their life experiences. And I think creativity always, ends up being this connection with, what are we presenting to the world, and how is that reflecting back to us as well as others? And we can really, it benefit personally, and then see that it benefits everyone else. And that's the beauty of it.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is that it's important to connect in ways like in this way through literature because we can't meet every single person on the planet, right? It would be
Right.
impossible. But
Right.
literature can help us understand other people because we, as humans, no matter where we come from on the planet, what kind of life we lead, there are certain things that we all experience. There are certain things that we all want, and certain things that we all need, and certain things that we all feel. So part of what literature can do is to help everyone understand that we are not alone, that all of the feelings that we have, somebody else feels them as well.
And it doesn't have to, as you're talking about literature, I was just thinking, in your medical profession, it's a creative venture as well. It's an intellectual kind of deep dive into why we are to the atom, why we are to the core of ourselves. And I just kind of realized that I don't have medical experience, but I when I was little, I kind of wanted to be a dentist for a while. So it was just the fascination with the human body, and what we can do with it and how we can heal others. And I'm curious if you feel that way, in that kind of almost an artistic sense of, medical field, or is it like a completely different side of the spectrum for you?
Oh, no, I absolutely think that medicine is creative as well. I mean, I think that almost everything we do is creative in some way.
Right.
But for medicine, because especially in my field, which is very patient facing, anytime you deal with human beings, you have to be creative. And anytime you deal with human beings, you have to listen. I think that's the
Right.
most important thing we can do as physicians is to listen to other people. And yeah, so you have to be able to listen without judgment or bias and try and understand people where they are.
Right, because yeah, to find those answers, again, another puzzle, just like creative writing, where what piece falls in, what could it be? And to hear the people, and you're also on in your writing, you're hearing your characters, and you're pulling from your own experience of the vulnerable side and the fun side, and everything to build up to what the solution could be for this story and for the patient. And I think that's a great combination. And like you were saying with the books that you combine, that is amazing for children who want both worlds. Like you said, you had that option. You have, you know, books about the human spirit, and having nonfiction books about, in a creative way, about you know STEAM and related things like that. So I think it's great for them to be able to say, this is by a doctor, this is from a doctor who's creative, and be inspired by that. And I think that's really fun, to have both all of that, all of the genres. And I think I'm sure you're like many others who, if you had to pick one, you might not be able to, or do you have like a favorite? Like I love picture books versus, or is it just a seasonal thing? Like I'm really into this and I'm loving it now and I love the next one later.
I think that I love doing all kinds of different projects. Novels take more, there are more words, so they take longer to write. So they tend to be kind of like an all-consuming project when I'm writing one. But it's not to say that picture books are easy. It's just that they're faster to draft.
Right.
But you may have to rewrite them 200 times. I'm not even kidding. So, yeah, but I also think that, kind of like in science that structure relates to function.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of form a story takes, it relates to what it is you're trying to say. So some things are naturally, I think, suited to picture books. And then, I come up with other ideas that are clearly kind of more complex and, need to be in a novel. And, I have my first YA is coming out next year. And I have a graphic novel that I'm hoping to get out there. So it's exciting.
That is very exciting. Wow, a graphic novel, that'll be fun. Oh my gosh. But I was just thinking as you said that I've known writers who might have started, a book that kind of does for them develop more into this is becoming longer and deeper and needs more words to get to where I'm going, and then they might think I need to make this into more of a novel now, or I'm actually going to skip up into adult instead of YA. So it is funny how it kind of evolves for some stories, and you kind of have to listen to that story as you're listening to a patient, maybe, and follow where it needs to go to live in the right space. And like you said with picture books, it's almost, even if it's in prose, it's poetry, and you have to limit the words so they speak with the picture. And I found that a lot as I've been learning that it can't be a novel. It's a picture book, so each word is special and unique in how it's telling that story. So it is definitely very challenging as well. A lot of but not that's something that people can't do as well, of course. But it has its own challenges.
Of course. Well, I think that no matter what you no matter what you write, trying to write picture books and trying to write poetry, like writing poetry and writing picture books, make you a better writer. Whether any of the poetry or the picture books are ever published is besides the point.
It's a great exercise. It's a great exercise.
Yes. That exercise in telling a story with very few words is an excellent one.
And I learned so much just doing the one I have. And yeah, it's hard. And it's like, wow, okay. So I love working with kids who have a really long story. And it's like, okay, let's pare it down like we're carving up like an actual piece of wood to get it to what it really needs to be. And seeing their excitement on it is fun. And then for them to go and read, your picture books or other picture books to then compare, the mentor texts. So we can't do it in a bubble. And just like you said, we can't meet everybody. We can at least get all of this around us in literature to inspire us. So I had a question about when you travel. Did you guys, when your cousins came home from school, and were you able to play around? Were you free to roam around? I know in my era, we had a lot more freedom than kids do today. But did you guys ever get in trouble, and did that ever inspire you creatively with some of your plots and stories?
Oh, did I personally get in trouble?
Right.
Well, of course. I mean, we all got in trouble, right? I think that it's interesting. Many of my stories, some of my stories involve magic. And I think that as a child, or even as when you think about magic in stories, you think magic is going to solve all of the problems. But the fun part about stories with magic in them is that magic usually causes more problems than it solves. And then they cause kind of bigger problems than you know how to solve. So right. I find that to be really fun. I think that all of being a person is about making mistakes and learning from them. So of course, characters are going to make mistakes, but it is really fun to make mistakes when there's magic involved and then have a giant mess that you're like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with this. So it's very
right. How
funny.
do you clean up a magic mess? How do you, yeah. How do you clean up a magic mess?
Exactly.
We don't have that experience. Oh, I love that.
Exactly.
That just made me think about it because, having that completely different experience. I mean, I didn't get in a whole lot of trouble as a kid, so I'm always fascinated by, you know, others and what they went through, which I think really kind of sprinkles their work with, you know, unique and fun ways, and also helps you process how to get out of those things and how you solve them as a child. And because I have a hard time in my writing, how do you solve the problem? How do I solve my own life problems? I mean, so I think I got to get stuck.
Right.
If I don't know how to solve my life problems, how am I going to solve this other person's problem? So um, I wanted to know, so with your picture books and when you see the illustrations for the first time, how does that resonate with you? Because as someone who on my end, I write them and illustrate them, the book. So if you see it for the first time, is it how do you feel? Is it how you imagined it, or is it more, or is it just so different?
Oh my gosh. I have to tell you, that is one of my favorite parts about doing picture books is seeing those first sketches. And like, I am always in awe that this insanely talented artist is like taking my words and making them into this art. I I'm always blown away. Like, I cannot even tell you. And you know what's really interesting? People are like, well, how does it compare to what you think about? The thing is that like when I write a picture book, I guess I imagine what it might look like, but really I'm not married to anything. I just know how the words sound, and
Mm,
I kind of know that there are going to be certain, like, there are going to be scenes, like each spread is going to be a different scene. So I try to make sure to write so that there's clearly a different scene with each spread, so it's not like a boring, thing for an artist to deal with.
right, they're
Um,
just having a conversation.
right, right. So it's like, oh God, and they're in the same place and so just doing the same thing and all they're doing is talking. No, that's not fun. So I try to do that, but other than that, I really try to leave it up in the air, because I don't like, I'm not an artist, so I don't really like think in that way. And I also know that like whatever I think of it's not going to be what it's going to be in the end. But so I'm always like, it's a combination of like surprise and like, oh my God, of course, that's perfect. And the illustrators almost always add something that like surprises me. Like a lot of times they will add like an animal, which is really fun. Like they'll add a dog or a cat or something like that. And you're like, oh, I didn't even, it's not even mentioned in the story, but it's like so fun and it enhances it and kids love it kind of thing. Or
Right.
just the angle with which they choose to make the illustration. And you're like, oh my gosh, like I never thought about that. So they always send me these sketches, and like, of course the art director and my editor have comments sometimes about like what is going on. Most of the time I don't have anything to say unless it is a nonfiction picture book and there's something like factually that we need to get
Exactly.
correct. Yeah, most of the time I'm like, oh my God, I mean, like, what am I going to say? Like, let's see what happens with the finished art. That's like so exciting. So it is one of the most amazing magical things that happens in publishing. You get a similar feeling. So some of my novels have interior art, and so there's some scenes that are illustrated, and you're like, oh my God. But for every book, there is a cover and there's an artist who does the cover, and it's like a little gift that you get, and it's like, this is incredible. So
Right.
yeah,
You wrote this
it's
thing
amazing. Yeah.
and somebody took that and mirrored it back to you, and that's really that special thing. And I have them come back and have expressed what you've written it's magical. That's really cool. Um so I wanted to know then how you define, with all of your books out, how do you define creative success for yourself?
Oh, it's so interesting because I have to say that, I mean, I think this is just true in life, but there is such a temptation to compare oneself with other people, right? It's like, oh, well, I've done this, but that person's done this, and like, why hasn't this happened? And blah, 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 blah. So for me, creative success is the thing that gives me joy on an ongoing basis, like that I am like happy and excited to keep going, and the thing that makes me want to keep writing. So that is success for me, is like if I can get myself into a place where I want to keep writing, that's all I've wanted. You know what I mean? And it's hard. It's really hard. And I understand that some of your listeners are pre-published, and it's really hard in that spot to be like, well, what do you even mean? Like, I've been working at this for X amount of time and nothing has happened. I don't have an agent. I'm not published. What is the deal with that? But all I can say is that everybody, even, including people who are published now, have all, once upon a time, we're not published, and we're all in that same space. And, but the thing that you cannot control what other people do, right? You cannot control what an agent thinks. You cannot control what an editor thinks. But what you can control is what you do. And the only way to keep going in this industry, or in kind of anything, honestly, but especially in this industry, is to find the things that make you happy and keep doing them. Right? Like, because you have to let go of the stuff that you can't control and just focus on the stuff that you can. And honestly, I mean, it's not like a magic formula, but it is the truth. It's like once you stop worrying about something is usually when it happens, because you're focusing on the thing that is going to make your art better.
Right. And that's why that's why you did it to begin with, for the joy, for the how it made you feel in the beginning. And, it's great to have the external feedback to relate to others, but then sometimes that will often become the identity of the creator to produce for them instead of themselves. So that's perfect. And I think that is a great place to kind of, it ends this thought of, where we are and what it's for and what it means to us, really. From being a child and reading and being inspired to where you are now and continuing to create for yourself. And the wonderful perk is that people love it, and we want you to keep doing this. So do you have any closing thoughts for anyone besides that amazing thought just now?
Yeah, what I would say is that ideas are truly everywhere. It's important that we go out and live our real lives and like experience true things. You know what I mean? Like, we have to do our day jobs. We have to like take care of our families, spend time with them, enjoy that. And all of those things, like our real life lives, feed into creativity. And then you just have to give yourself space to let that creativity flow. So even if you are a highly regimented person, put it on your calendar and say, this is the time, this is an hour, or this is 15 minutes, because that's how I started, was 15 minutes. That's all I had. This is the time for me where I get to do whatever I want creatively, and none of that time is ever wasted.
That is amazing and perfect, and I love it. That makes me want to cry. So thank you. Let us get some information. I mean, people can look you up and find you, but I would like you to share where people can find you online.
Yeah. So my website is just my name, www.rajanilarocca.com, RajaniLarocca.com. And I'm on Bluesky and Instagram as @Rajani LaRocca. And I'm on Facebook too. It's Rajani LaRocca writer.
I am always amazed how you can write in so many different genres and styles. So, and I'm so glad you're able to join me today and share with others some of these thoughts that they definitely need and I need. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Becky. This was such a wonderful discussion. You asked some really wonderful questions. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. And thank you again to our listeners for joining us. If you enjoyed the podcast and found it valuable, please share it with others, and we can reach people who might like a little bit of inspiration on their own creative journey. And until next time, I'm Becky Gehrisch, and happy creating.
Hey there, creative minds. Are you ready for the next burst of inspiration? Make sure to subscribe to the Origins of Creativity podcast in your favorite podcast app for all our latest episodes. Visit booklinkmedia.com/podcast for show details, links to connect with us, and so much more. This has been the Origins of Creativity podcast, where inspiration meets imagination.